Good morning, everyone. This is Blaine Pardoe, and welcome to Writers Fix Problems. I didn't arrange a guest this week, mostly because we spent a lot of time this weekend at the live gathering for the Council of Future Conflicts, who sponsors the show. And it was really a fascinating time to actually talk with fans of the show, but it was interesting because there are several people that were at the meeting who had questions about how to get published, what routes to go, things along those lines. And I was like, gee, there's a lot of people out there that probably, if that small group of 24 people has two or three people that have those kind of questions, probably the larger audience has that. And I tend to think that the folks that tune into the Council of Future Conflicts and this show tend to be more read and more interested in pursuing some degree of publishing around their books or their works. So what I thought I'd do is try to do kind of a very basic primer on how you pursue getting your work published. And it's not that easy. Some of it is, some of it can be confusing, and I found that there's not a lot of great resources out there to really kind of guide you, other than publishers who try to guide you to use their services or their platforms to do it, and things along those lines. There's a lot of slanted opinions on this, and I've been in the publishing business for a long time. I've done large scale New York publishing companies, such as Penguin Putnam, Skyhorse, and a number of those types of publishers. I've also done indie publishers, and I've also done self-publishing. So I'm going to approach all three of those. I do want to welcome Watcher to the show. Good morning, Watcher.
Hey, good morning, Blaine. I'm really excited to hear about this from you, to be honest. As soon as I heard that we didn't have a guest and that it was just going to be you sharing knowledge, I got actually, to be honest, like twice as stoked as normal, because this is all stuff that I personally wonder about as well.
Well, and for those of you who are tuning in, make sure you click like and do subscribe to the show. I'll do that at the end as well. The likes help us, and we want to make sure we get the word out about the show and what we have to offer. Next week, we're going to be talking with a really cool author on some old-fashioned swords and sorcery, swashbuckling, almost Conan-esque
Oh, heck yeah.
fiction. I'm halfway through his book right now, and it's bothering the hell out of me because it's damn good. It's weird when you read another author and you go, I wish I wrote this well. So we're gonna have a lot of fun next week, and the week after we have a guest lined up as well. So we've got a lot going on in this arena. But today we're going to talk about you as a viewer. What are your questions about getting published, and walk you through what are the choices you have and what are the pros and cons around those types of things. And I'm doing a little bit of this off cuff. I've made a couple of quick notes before the show just so that I didn't lose track of everything. But a lot of this will also, at the end, we're going to really open it up for questions, mostly because I'm sure you guys have them as you go through this. Now, in the old days, the way things worked were what we called the traditional publishing route, which is you had to get an agent. The agent then gets a publisher, and then the publisher publishes your book eventually, and you get confusing royalty statements, and your agent takes some of your money. And that was the old school route, and that route still exists out there, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The other two options that you have now that are very different and I think are very exciting, one is the capability to self-publish. Kindle has, the Amazon people have made this with Kindle Direct Press, KDP, very easy. And there's pros and cons to that. They've made it so anybody can publish a book, and that's the pro. The con is they've made it so anybody can publish a book. Because some books shouldn't be published, I'll be honest with you. They're just weird, or they're poorly done, etc.
But it's shocking how many of those also have New York Times bestsellers next to the title, but wouldn't.
Yeah, there's a few of those, but it's really the low end that I see a lot of books where it's like dinosaur sex acts and weird stuff that it's
well, see, stuff like that. There's a hyper niche market for everything,
yeah. There is, but boy, I'll tell you, it just shouldn't. Those are the kind of books that, frankly, just, in my opinion, shouldn't even be out there. I think they make us all lesser because. And finally, there's the other realm. So you have the traditional route, you have self-publishing, you have the indie publisher route, and I have some experience in this, and I'll be talking about all three of these routes for you, and tell you what the pros and cons are about those. So let's talk about the traditional route, because what I hear from a lot of people is, but I want to walk into Books a Million or Barnes and Noble, because those are the only two bookstores left, and I want to see my book on a shelf. Well, those tend to be from what I call the traditional publishers or the New York publishing houses. Um, there are a few exceptions to that, obviously, but it's usually, the larger scale publishers like Penguin Putnam or Hatchet Books or HarperCollins or those types of publishers. Those are the big publishing houses. You, as a normal human being, are not permitted to get to those people in most cases. Very few of them have what I would call open submission policies, where you can send them an outline of your book, your first 2 or 3 chapters, et cetera, and an introduction letter, and that they'll read it and then reach out to you and talk to you about your book. Most of them say, we don't want to talk to you unless you have an agent. Now, getting an agent it's not as tricky as it sounds. There used to be a book, and I think it's still out there, called The Writer's Market. I recommend this book highly if you're thinking about going down the traditional path, because it lists every agent in the country, what they specialize in, and how to contact them and submit your material for review. It also lists all the publishers, what their review policies are, how to contact them, etc. It's a great reference source, and it gets updated every year. Most libraries used to carry the Writer's Market. I don't know if they still do. Getting an agent means you send your agent kind of a sample chapter or two and an outline for here's what the book is. You talk about what the marketing for the book is. Who are you trying to reach with the book? The agent gets that, and then the agent takes that and says, okay, this is an interesting idea. Well, they can reject it. And some will ghost you and just not respond at all. Some will send you a very simple rejection letter. They're not going to explain why they rejected it usually. If they do accept your book, what they'll 90% of the time say is, this is a great idea for a book. So here's the changes you need to make so that I can go sell it. They'll say, you need to, change the title. You need to change the order of these chapters. You need to alter what you're doing. Now, you don't actually have to have a book done to do this. You can actually submit a few sample chapters, an outline for the rest of the book, and be just fine. You're not usually submitting an entire book unless an agent requires that. And again, the Writer's Market's a great place to check for that. But you send it to an agent, and an agent's going to tell you, in most cases, here's some changes you need to make. So you have to make those changes in order for them to be comfortable positioning your book. I call this the first great compromise. So you've put your heart and soul into this. You've got a vision, etc. And the first thing you're being told is, look, in order for me to sell this book, you've got to compromise. So you have to change. So then the agent goes out and will pepper the industry with their contacts to try to position your book. You may get 2 or 3 interests on that, which is what you really want, because you can kind of get into a bidding war. But the publishers will then work it out with your agent as to, here's where we need to go, and this is what we're willing to pay for your book, etc. And so they will come back to you, and then the publisher will say, great, sign this contract. Your agent will get you a copy of the contract. You'll sign it. Then the publisher will tell you, well, here's some things you need to change with your book. I call this the second great compromise. So in order for us to publish your book, here's some things we want you to change or tweak. Ironically, in 1 or 2 cases, I have had them ask me to put things in that the agent had me take out. And I give that little snippet for a reason. Agents are not infallible by any means. I'm not going to slam my agent. He's a nice guy, and I don't have anything nasty to say about him. But they don't know everything, and in some cases, they get it wrong. And in some cases, you're not going to know why you got rejected by certain publishers and excited, responses from other publishers. So what happens at that point is now you actually have to produce a manuscript. You will take their suggestions and incorporate them. You'll work with an editor. You get your book, laid out. You will go through several, and I can't stress this enough, several reviews of your book from an editorial process. You will read your book probably 5 or 6 times after you've produced your final copy of your book. You'll have to read it 5 or 6 times with tweaks and edits and things along those lines. Now, the publisher in the traditional route handles your editing and your proofing. They'll go through that. They will handle the layout. Those things are all handled in the traditional route by the publisher. They will also occasionally, and it's actually pretty rare, ask you, what are your ideas around a cover? They are not necessarily obligated by any means to follow any of your suggestions. So they may say, what chapter do you want us to look at for ideas for a cover? And you may send them a chapter. And what you get back may be a completely different vision, impression, image, whatever. Bear in mind, their marketing people have a great deal of influence on what they do around covers, etc. So, you get to look at it and you might get to say, are there things you want to tweak or change to it? But, for the most part, they're assuming all the risk in the traditional publishing route. They're the ones putting up all the money to do this. So from their perspective, it's kind of like, look, your job is to provide a manuscript and in good form. We will handle everything else. They also handle the audiobooks. So they will oftentimes have somebody already in mind to do the narration. You will have to provide some material to assist in that, usually like pronunciation guides. I have to do one this afternoon for a book, where you have to go through all the names of everything in the book and tell the narrator, essentially, do they have a dialect? Is it male or female? Is there something about their voice that you want in the book? It doesn't mean necessarily that the narrator is going to follow it. I've had some narrators really do that well. Some don't. It's fine. In some cases, I have had publishers publish my audiobook without any input from me whatsoever. So a larger publisher, because they're assuming the risk, also take the reins on this. And so some of your creative control kind of slips away from you. Now, for some of you, that may be a blessing. I will tell you, I recently went through the next book in the Blue Dawn series. I had to go through and review the audiobook. It's 15 hours of listening to someone read me a book that I have now read 5 or 6 times, plus I wrote it. It can be exhausting. So it's sometimes really a blessing to have them involved. Sometimes they're not. So take a deep breath here for a second. This is the traditional publishing route. Now, you're probably saying that's the part where the book goes to print and I start making money. Well, let's temper that a little bit with traditional publishing. Traditional publishers at this point will put your book in a catalog. So they will have a paragraph or 2 describing your book. Sometimes they're even accurate. And they'll have a picture of the cover, and they'll send that out to bookstores. And they'll say, essentially, how many copies of this do you want on your shelf? And regionally, the bookstores may have recommendations based on prior sales from that publisher, et cetera, but they will oftentimes, the individual bookstore gets to make the call on that. And so they will order the books in advance. That process of having your book done in a catalog with a cover so that they can see it and place orders can actually take a year. And that's, I think, one of the things about the traditional publishing route a lot of people don't fully understand. Now, I have a book coming out from a traditional publisher in New York, and they're actually a great publisher to work with. But I wrote a short story for an anthology, and I finished that short story in November. This book won't be out until the 2nd of January. So it's over a year as the cycle goes through. Now, the story's been edited. I recently stumbled across on Amazon the cover for the book, which I was pretty pumped about. It was like, oh, there's a cover. That's cool. But your lead time on that is a long time. And for you as a writer, you're kind of like, well, I'm done writing and I know there's a cover. How come the book isn't out? Well, with a traditional publisher, it's going to be a long time before that happens. Now, they do market your book. I mean, quite literally, they're sending out thousands of these catalogs, both online and in paper copy, to generate sales. They do have more access. The larger scale traditional publishers have greater access, I would say, to bookstores to be able to make sure that when your book releases, it actually shows up on a bookshelf. Now, I kind of used to think that was what book publishing was, but honestly, it doesn't shock me if I see my books on a shelf or if I don't, because most of the sales I've found actually occur online through Amazon or through Barnes and Noble online. Your actual movement of physical copies of books through bookstores is remarkably low. But I also understand that a lot of authors really get jazzed by seeing, walking into a bookstore and seeing your book there. And I'll tell you, there's ways around that too. With the traditional publishers, the key is, since they're assuming all the risk and they're spending the money on some marketing, they don't put up a lot of money for new authors and stuff for marketing because they don't know if your book's going to sell. The vast majority, 90% of their money, is concentrated marketing wise on their established writers that they already know are bestsellers. So you're getting a pretty small piece of the pie, but it does occur. But because they're assuming all the risks for marketing and production of the audiobook, they're spending thousands of dollars to get your audiobook produced. They're spending the money for the layout of your book. The artist has to be paid for the cover. The editor has to be paid, to edit your book and proof it, etc. Because they're going to do that, your royalties with a traditional publisher are smaller. So, I'm not going to quote you specific royalties, but it's not a shock to have somebody go, you're only getting a 20 to 25% royalty, from a traditional publisher. They're keeping 75% of it because they've put in the money up front to get your book out. And they're going to take that money from that time forward. Also, depending on the contract and how you do it, if there's the potential for game rights, for television and movie rights, they will usually get a percentage of that too. And they also get a say in the decision of, if somebody approached you and say, hey, I want to option this for a movie, well, they get to weigh in on that as well. So depending on how you structure your contracts, and that's where an agent will help you with that. The agent will also take 15% or so of what you make. So of your 25%, and I'm going to ballpark that. I'm not saying that's what you're going to get. I'm saying that's a range. Plus or minus, they're going to take their 15%. So you don't even get the actual money from a traditional publisher first. The initial check goes to your agent. Your agent then cashes that check, takes out their 15%, and then sends you the royalty report and sends you your portion of it. So that can be very confusing for a lot of people to go through and to really struggle through. The key is with traditional publishing, because they're taking all the risks, they're taking the bulk of the money. And that can be frustrating for you, especially as you get royalty reports, which require a small amount of witchcraft to fully understand and comprehend. you can really you tend to get a little frustrated after your first or second book out through a traditional publisher because you're like, I don't feel like I'm getting traction here. And you start questioning, well, how much marketing are they really doing around me? Well, until you've established yourself, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end, it's really hard for you to just crank out a book and automatically have people grab it off a bookshelf and start buying it in large numbers. Um, so that's that realm. That's the traditional route in a nutshell. Watcher, do we have any questions that have popped up as I've been babbling?
No, just some comments. So, just a guess says 15% is I think what they got. Brandon J says this is great. Thanks for covering it. I will have to watch the replay. I'd be interested in your process for outlining as well. Yeah, I guess that is kind of a question, so I'll let that go.
Okay. All right. Well, no, it's fair. And I'm using 25% because I don't know what new authors get. So I'm an established author. So it's really hard for me to even remotely get close to that. So that's your traditional route. And that's the route a lot of people want to go to. And some of it's ego. I mean, like I said, they want to walk into a Books A Million and see their book on the shelf and call their wife over and take the picture of it.
Now, there's something that I personally have to say, because this is something that I've been turning over in my head and it makes me giggle. And I've never shared it before, and I think you're the one person who will truly appreciate this. Isn't it funny how vanity publishing has been flipped on its head? Vanity publishing is now going through a traditional publisher. You're doing it for your own vanity.
Yeah, in some respects, there's still a big market out there that does the vanity press type stuff, and I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the indie publishers because it's still out there. But yeah, a lot of it is your ego. It's I want this. The old vanity school was terrible because it was, and I talked to one person who's like, I have a garage with 250 copies of my hardcover book in it. And I'm like, yeah, because Vanity Press, you had to buy your books, and you owned them. And so you take ownership, and you have to store them. So a lot of things have been upended, and I think Amazon has upended a lot with the vast majority of the sales actually just go through Amazon. So let's talk about the self-publishing route. Now, Amazon, and there's other services out there as well, offer a free service called Kindle Direct Press. There's others out there that charge like $45 a book, or they're free to publish your book online and to make the paperback and audio versions available if you have those. And they don't charge a penny for it. Kindle Direct Press, KDP. You could look it up. The process is there. I've navigated it several times. I've had some books that, because of their timing, etc., I haven't gone to a publisher to do them. I've just put them out myself, just because I wanted the books out there. The thing about self-publishing is it's all on you. Okay. You need to go find an editor. You need to go find a cover artist. You need to hire an audiobook narrator. Depending on your levels of skill, you may have to hire a layout person to lay out both your ebook and your print book. So these things may all come down on you. Now, there's services out there like Fiverr and several others that are available out there for you to find people that do this, but it can be costly. Now, the good news is you're assuming all of the risk, so you get the vast majority of the reward. So, while I was throwing out before a number of, let's say, 25% with a traditional publisher, it flips around depending on how you want to make your agreement with Amazon. For example, you can get up as high as 75% of the money, the profits coming in from your book, which is great because it's like, hey, I wrote the book, I'm getting the vast majority of the cash for the book. That is a fantastic way to go. like I said, you have to do all the work, which means now you become a project manager for your book. You're no longer an artist writing a book. You're now managing all of the elements of the book. And you're going to run into cover artists who don't work out well, or that you have a lot of problems with. You're going to struggle with some of your editors. While they may claim to have great credits, you may get somebody that's not good. I always recommend talk to other authors who have done self-publishing. They can steer you. I have a guy that I recommend. I actually have 2 editors I highly recommend who do pro bono, or we're not pro bono, ad hoc. Off, if you catch them at the right time and they're between projects, they'll do it for a reasonable fee. But it comes down on you to get that done. The marketing is entirely on you. Amazon will put your book out, and there's a lot of ways to manipulate the algorithms with Amazon. I could almost do a whole show on that, because it's witchcraft and science merging together. It's arcane and dangerous stuff. There's ways you can position your book so that you can get more hits to it, etc., and things along those lines. But the marketing of the book is entirely on you when you self-publish. You take all the risks, you get the vast majority of the income. So there's pros and cons to it. The thing I think appeals to a lot of people with the self-publishing route is when you're ready for your book to be available, you click a button and within 24 hours it's available. It's that simple. So you're not waiting, let's say, a year for that to happen. Now, will those books end up in a bookstore? Because, a lot of people are curious about that. Well, they actually are tied in with Ingram and other distributors. And a bookstore, if you publish something on Kindle Direct Press and it's available in hard copy, a bookstore can order your books. But bear in mind, there are 4 million books, I think, up on Amazon right now. So it's not like people are going through the list going, oh, wow, these are the 500 books that were published this week. Let's see which ones we want to have in the bookstore. What it really means is anybody who goes to a Barnes & Noble or Books A Million can walk up and say, can I order this book by Blaine Pardoe? And they can pull it up on their computer and say, yes, we can order you a copy of that. You have to bear in mind, with the number of books that are out there too, the percentage that's actually in a bookstore is so small that most of the stuff that does get sold, in many depending on the store you're at, etc., is custom orders like that. So, anybody telling you, well, if you self-publish, your stuff isn't going to be in a bookstore, that's not entirely true. They're kind of slanting that story. The good news is, though, it's fast. It's relatively easy. I mean, they have a Word template for you to put your book in if you want to try to do layout on your own. I've done it. It can be frustrating at times, but I recommend doing several test prints of your book, which Amazon allows, so that you can see what it looks like to make sure you got it right. But the process is actually easy. There's a number of videos out there on how to use Kindle Direct Press that can walk you through some of this stuff. So if you're a true go-getter and you're like, hey, I just want to crank out my own books, hey, Kindle Direct Press is the way to go. It is super simple, and you self-publish. That's it. You get complete control over every aspect of it, but you assume all the risks, and it can cost thousands of dollars to get a good editor. It can cost hundreds of dollars, up to $1,000 or more for a good cover. You're going to get an audiobook narrator. It is anywhere from, depending on if you're using Bobby down the street because he's got a great voice or whatever, and you have the right facilities to not only record but edit, you can hire an audiobook person for anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 or more per book. You want, and editing audio files is a pain in the butt, as I'm sure Watcher can attest to. So you can go down that path if you. It's but it's on you. Now, so we've talked about the traditional route. We've talked about self-publishing. There's kind of a niche in the middle, which I really enjoy the most right now, which is the indie publisher. How do you define an indie publisher? Well, it's somebody who's not in the mainstream New York publishing realm, that they're open to dealing directly with the writers rather than through an agent. That doesn't mean if you have an agent, you can't go to an indie publisher. Totally 100% can, but your agent's still going to take 15%. But you can engage usually directly with an indie publisher. Now, what I like about indie publishers is you get a much higher degree of control, because you're kind of signing up to join a team, and you're part of their team, so they want you actively engaged. Now, they do provide some marketing, and I've heard people go, well, indie publishers, they don't market stuff real well. Well, what do you want them to do? Take out ads and push stuff out there? That's complicated, and there's a lot of arguments I've heard pro and con that some of the ads on Facebook and Twitter for books don't work or work haphazardly. So that could be a problem, and it can be very problematic to do. Indie publishers are highly motivated to sell your book because they get money, and so do you. Their royalties are better than the traditional publishers. They're not as great as self-publishing, so they're somewhere in the middle, which is good, because they're assuming some of the risk. They usually have their own editors, either on staff or that they contract to work with for a book. They will usually have a pool or suggestions about who to use for the audiobook narration, and they've probably negotiated some good rates as a result of that. They may ask you to review, here's 4 audiobook guys we work with that we know will deliver on time and have your book done, etc. Here, review a chapter. Here, we've had them read at one of your chapters, each one of them, and you have to sit and listen. It's an audiobook narrator audition. And I've had a number of publishers do that, and I think it's great stuff. The timing is very similar, really, to the self-publishing, although they usually have a schedule that they're trying to fill. So, I recently interviewed on this show the president of Tuscany Books, and he was talking about, I've got a schedule kind of mapped out here. I can add books into it, but I have a schedule that goes out 18 months. Because he knows certain books for series are going to be coming in, trickling in. It doesn't mean your book's going to take 18 months to get out, but they'll fit it in where appropriate, because, they can't just blast a book out a day. Then they just become kind of background noise when they do that. So, the timing is very similar to self-publishing. When I write an indie book, for example, for the series I'm doing, Land and Sea, one of the things I've noticed is my publisher's like, so when do you want the book to come out? And I'll say in the fall, and they'll go, okay, well, here's what we have coming out. Let's see where we can fit it in. And it's the same with the Blue Dawn series I do with Defiance Press. They work with me about, well, here's 3 dates we have for having this book out to meet our schedule and our current load of books that we're working on in production. And so you pick the date. So you have a degree of control that's very similar in many respects to what you have with the self-publishing, other than, self-publishing, you can go, it's Friday night, I finished the book, publish. The other thing is, a lot of the risk is still assumed by the publisher. They are footing the money for an editor. They're footing the money for a cover. Or you may say, well, here's an artist I want to use. Can I come up with my own cover? And they'll say, okay, you can do that. We're going to not include the cost of the cover in kind of what you owe back in terms of the book. And it does work out really well. I think the indie publishing business has exploded, mostly because they've given the authors a greater degree of control over their content. unlike a traditional New York publisher that might go, well, we really like the book, but can you kill chapter 5? Usually with an indie guy, they're like, look, you have a vision. We're not here to restructure your book or anything unless we see something just blatantly horrible in it. But our job is to make sure that your story comes across as you wrote it. And I really do appreciate that on the indie publishers as opposed to the New York publishers. I think the indie publishers, they fill very specific niches. They also have fantastic sales. And I think the indie publishers, in some respects, I've seen some numbers from Chris Kennedy Books was publishing some stuff recently, as Atheon Books. I think Atheon Books is now considered, as much as they're an indie publisher, I think they're number 4 or 5 in the industry for military sci-fi or for sci-fi books. So some of these, what I would call indie publishers, are real powerhouses in terms of their raw sales. Again, if I went through the bookstore the other day, I didn't see any books from Atheon Books. I didn't see any books from Tuscany. I didn't see any books from Wargate or whatever. That doesn't mean that their books aren't selling or that I couldn't have ordered them if I wanted them. It simply means that, they're doing the bulk of their sales through Amazon and through other, online means. And that's where they're getting their sales. And in the end, as an author, it's not so much, the care and concern about a physical copy kind of evaporates. You tend to focus on what are my sales. Some additional notes I kind of want to throw out there on these 3 processes, just so you understand. Royalty reports are a freaking nightmare. The best royalty report I ever get is from Wargate Books because it's so damn simple. It's like, here's how many books we sold. That's it. You go the traditional route and bookstores are buying, let's say, a box of your books or 8 of your books for their shelf. If that book doesn't sell, they'll send it back to the distributor. And so you'll get things like, initially when your book launches, you'll get sales of hard copies and you'll go, wow, that's great. And you'll get a nice big royalty check. Then the next time you come back, it's a negative royalty check because certain books didn't sell in certain markets and they sent the books back. Well, now you have a deficit on what you owe or what you're owed for a royalty, and you have to sell more books in order to work that deficit off. That can be a real pain in the butt. And again, for the traditional publishers, that's a lot of what they're doing, is physically putting books in bookstores, be they independent bookstores or the big chains, and you get books back. But that doesn't mean it's not a great publishing route to go with. I started in that realm with Penguin Putnam myself, and I there are times I miss that, but not as much as you might think. It's more now about the money. A number of authors have asked me as well, especially this came up at the meeting we had this weekend with the Council of Future Conflicts in Louisville. They were like, so what percentage of your book sales are what? And I will tell you, it has changed dramatically, especially with COVID. Audiobooks used to be a real small percent. I will say at this point, 20 to 25% of my sales are audiobooks, if not more. Online digital books are a huge seller. And, that easily is a third right there. And that leaves you another third for your physical copies. I've been amazed because Kindle Direct Press now is allowed publishing of paper or of hardcover books. And I've been shocked by the numbers I've seen on the hardcover books because a lot of fans are collectors as well. They want to have the whole set on a bookshelf somewhere. So they may buy a reading copy, which is a paperback, but then they have the hardcover to kind of keep. The fans drive the industry, but audiobooks have really taken off. It's something that can't be ignored at this point. Some additional thoughts I have on these paths. We interviewed recently on an episode Angry American about his series, and it was really interesting. He started out by kind of reaching out to friends of his and saying, "Hey, I wrote this up as a chapter. What do you think?" And he got feedback from them, and they, gave him feedback that he incorporated, etc. And then he decided, I can self-publish this, and his book sales have been just through the roof. You look at that model, it's not a bad approach. Having a blog where you can put up a sample chapter of a book and say, "So what do you guys think?" You're going to get good feedback, hopefully. Some feedback is worthless, but it's good to do. It's always, you need to be open to feedback. I will say this, I don't spend a lot of time looking at the feedback from the Amazon starred feedback in terms of what people put, because a lot of people just simply write "great book" or "I didn't like this book because of," and I'll focus a little bit on those because I want to see what they were stumbling with. But sometimes you can't overcome their problems. So, for example, on Land and Sea, I had somebody who gave very good feedback. They said, "I can't keep track of 8 characters. It's too much for me." Well, I'm not going to be able to make that change, okay, in terms of the style and the approach for the series. But I also know, well, this is a barrier for some of the people, so you have to factor that in. Um, do we have any questions, Watcher, or anything that's come up since I started the second wave of
The
battle?
only real question I've seen so far is, does Amazon have their own publishing arm? Or doesn't Amazon have their own indie publishing arm?
Yeah, it's really the Kindle Direct Press is their indie publisher. That's the only one I'm aware of. There may be something out there I'm unaware of, but their Kindle Direct Press is their publishing mechanism.
Well, and then I'm going to add something from my side of this, which is Blaine has the experience of how to produce an audiobook when you have various different publishing arms and that kind of stuff. If you just need to do it solo, I'm telling you guys right now, Amazon's made it the most simple it could possibly be. They have a service called ACX. If you have a book and it's ready to go, just go there right now. You can specify exactly what you want in a reader, and then ACX has this giant pool of people who are waiting at home for a chance to be able to make some extra money through audiobooks that'll audition, and then you can pick from among them. Or you can just say, "Hey, I'm fine. Just go with whoever is industry standard and is not busy."
There's pros and cons to that. I had a discussion with one publisher, and they're like, "You gotta be careful because sometimes people get really addicted." Hi, Scott. People get really addicted to a certain narrator.
Oh yes, no.
If
If
that
you
narrator is not available for your book, it can be frustrating for them because they go, "Well, I only want books narrated by that guy or that gal," and I get that. It's something I haven't had to deal with much in the past, but now as a writer, you're part of a broader team, and so you have to watch for stuff like that.
true, yeah.
Sorry to just jump right in with you guys, but I figured since you didn't have a guest today, it would be a little easier. But Blaine, about the audiobook thing, I was thinking you've got with Land and Sea, you've got kind of almost like 3 lines, right? You've got the mainline books, you've got your anthology books that I think your first one came out. The 4th book in the series was the anthology book,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
And then what was it? Rourke's Rift. That book is in the world, and it's even referenced in book 3, but it's kind of like it's a side story, isn't it?
Yes, sort of. There,
I mean,
Ratchet's Run.
yeah, I mean, I have
Ratchet's Run
Ratchet's Run.
actually has a couple ties to the main storyline as well, and yeah, it's crazy. Well, it's what's fun is we're doing the anthology right now, and some of the short stories in the anthology are told from a female perspective. So we actually, for those stories, hired a female narrator, and we're using the narrator who's done the rest of the series for the rest of the stories. So they've had to coordinate with each other and things along those lines. So it's been an interesting ride.
Well, I recently just did the entire Honor Harrigan series, and some of those female narrators, because over many years they had several different female narrators, and some of them could really handle both men and female characters, but others it was kind of like,
Yeah, they never. Here's the thing about it: as a writer, you have in your head what a character sounds like. I will tell you that
Right.
no narrator on the planet ever gets it right to what you had in your head when you put the words on the paper. That part's frustrating as hell, but it's part of the reality of life. And you want to get somebody who can convey the story with the right tone and the right approach. The guy I used for Blue Dawn wouldn't be a good narrator, for example, for the Land and Sea series.
Mm-hmm.
But he's exactly what I wanted for Blue Dawn. The right tone that he has, etc. Yeah, he has to do female characters, and sometimes that's a bit of a stretch, but he's up to it, and I enjoy that.
Yeah, I never felt like you're talking about keeping track of 8 characters is hard. Sometimes the names of all the different characters are hard for me. But in Blue Dawn, especially in the last book, not the one that the one I just got, the one before that, the last in the audiobook series, he does a good job of that female character. Which the
Haley.
former Kaylee. Yeah, he does a really good job of because she was a major part of that story. And so for me, when men and women do opposite sex, they have less range. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So it does muddle in my head who is talking. Whereas with the men, it's almost always a very kind of obvious, like each guy gets his own voice, and these voice actors are really good at conveying the different personalities. And you've been very lucky in the people that you've had working for you. So that's awesome.
We've looked for the right talent, and again, working with an indie publisher, they narrowed it down for me and said, here's 4 or 5 people to look at, and we took a look at 2 or 3 people for Land and Sea that were all, by the way, outstanding. Every one of them had done stuff with Wargate, and every one of them was top notch. But they were like, we kind of think it might be this guy, and they were right. They totally got the right guy. So it's been really good. Honestly, it's been a lot of fun to do. Audiobooks are something you just can't escape at this point. And I think during COVID, a lot of people went to audiobooks much like they did podcasts, etc. It was something to listen to as opposed to sitting down and reading. And they latch onto it. I will tell you, from an editing perspective, it's really hard to sit and listen to 15 hours of somebody reading a book you've written back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to figure out if there's mistakes or errors or things. It's not an easy task, but it's also incredibly necessary right now. Now, if you talked to me 3 years ago and talked about audiobooks, they were such a small chunk of the market before COVID. A lot of publishers just didn't even make audiobooks of certain books. They just didn't do it. Now, you pretty much have to hop on board with that. That has to be part of your plan. I think the biggest advice I have, and I don't care if you go down the traditional route, self-publishing or indie press, I do want to make sure I get this across to you today. You still got to have a great story and great characters, but no matter what, you have to build a tribe. And I'm using that phrase because that's what was talked to me about from Wargate. They said, it's important that you build a tribe. And they're talking about you have to build your fan base. So you have to do that. And it doesn't matter what route you're going, you need to have developed and engaged with your fan community and bring them along with you on the journey so that they know what's going on and can be a part of it. And there's no cookbook for how to do that. I wish there was.
That I really like that they tell you that, because one of the things that I discovered as being part of Comicsgate was that every every book sold within Comicsgate is absolutely earned through direct interaction with I don't want to say fans, because you're mostly Comicsgate has been successful through YouTube, right? So Ethan Van Sciver basically lays it out as saying, hey, listen, we're doing a comic convention every day, every week, essentially. But it's just on YouTube, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
like we're doing the panel show, right? And the panel is here on my channel, or it's on whatever channel. And the idea is you have to develop your own platform so that then you can do content delivery to the people who have found you. And then if the better you are on your channel, the more people will gravitate to your content. And it becomes this kind of, the snowball going down the hill. It's not a new model. It's an old model. It's just using new technology and new kind of sensibilities that we have here within, the internet age.
You're right. And I will say that I think a lot of authors, there are the occasional. You get a Rick Partlow, and I interviewed Rick. He's fantastic. God, I love his work. And Rick was like, "Hey, my first book just like freaking took off," and I was surprised by how successful it was. But he now manages his fan base, and he has specific Twitter account. He uses his Twitter account for a specific reason. He uses his Facebook account for a specific reason. And there's certain content that don't cross over between those. And how you engage with your fans is really important. And I think it's fascinating. People take it for granted and go, well, the publisher should be doing all that work for you. They're not going to. And you shouldn't expect them to at this stage. And if you're expecting the publisher to do all of your marketing for you, I have news for you. You're going to face a lot of disappointment as a writer. You have to take the reins on that. And what Wargate told me was go out and build your tribe. And they said, it's not a lot of work on your part, but trust me, you need a tribe. And, the fans already have established a Facebook group, and we have 200 members in it. The book series has only been out since January, but, the fans are out there doing, they're formed their own group. They share stories about weird shit found in the ocean and artwork that they find that's similar to land and sea. And, it's an organic thing. We didn't ask anybody to make it.
Well, this is where fan stories come from. And, there's all kinds, it's just self-perpetuating thing a lot of times. And what's funny is how even some series die away and the fan base continues forward independently of what the creators and the publishers are doing.
Well, and some, you look at the fan base alone for Game of Thrones, when all is said and done, other than the TV show, George R.R. Martin isn't putting out new books. Well, he did a history book of the Targaryens, but that was really a ghostwritten book. He hasn't been cranking out new material right and left, but he's still got an active fan base out there. We could spend a whole show talking about his horrible and horrific mistakes and how he's dealt with that. But, you as an author you've got to build your tribe. You have to engage with the fans. And that means you need to be open to their feedback. Some of them like what you're doing. Some have suggestions. I've had some fans reach out to me and say, well, this is stuff I want. I'd like to see something about X, Y, and Z. And some of the times the ideas are really damn good and I incorporate them. So, they are a source for you as a writer. And they're also a test bed. You can put stuff up in front of them and say, so what do you think about this? And they'll respond to it. Recently, what I started doing to build my tribe is I need a lot of characters, because in the real world, you send in a squad. It's not just the squad leader. It's all the people.
Yeah.
And, I need character names. So I reached out to the fan base on Facebook and I said, hey, who wants to be in the book? I can't guarantee you're going to live. Can't guarantee you're going to get a role you like, but I need names, and I incorporated, God, I think 40 names in the last book that I wrote. And I just put a post up yesterday to do the same thing again and said, okay, well, now I'm working on the next trilogy. I need these guys can't use their names because I already used them. So give me new names.
I guess Watcher could be a surname of some sort,
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got plans for Watcher.
Oh, boy.
The demented drone pilot.
Joy Boy it is.
Yeah, it's a Joy Boy, and he's a Marine Joy Boy. Yeah.
Hitting close to home there.
Yeah, well, you gotta have some fun. But I think as a writer, you have your responsibilities go beyond just writing a book. And I've walked you through the traditional route, self-publishing and indie publishers. There's a lot of responsibility you have as a writer in this process. I can't draw stick people, okay? I'm terrible at art, but I'm really good at finding people to get me good artists or who have good artistic vision. I'm not an editor, and no matter what editing tool I use, I do use one because it was recommended by an editor. My editor still finds stuff to correct and fix and stuff, and I really appreciate her doing that because she makes me look better every time. So you have to be able to go down those paths, and you have an active role in this production of getting your book out to market. And I don't think a lot of writers fully understand or comprehend that.
Yeah, I was gonna just give a little bit on that. So I have a couple of other friends who are authors, and one of them did a very interesting thing. She decided they self-published through Amazon, and they made quite a lot of money doing so, but they were not in bookstores. And she decided that she wanted to be in bookstores. So at first she just approached local stores to the area and said, hey, would you be willing to carry a book by a local author? And suddenly she was on all the local shelves. And she decided that wasn't quite good enough for her. And so she started to do what she calls guerrilla marketing, where she would just take a stack of her book and walk into a bookstore and put it on the shelf. So there are ways, folks.
You don't get any money that way.
Well, Kevin's got a question.
Kevin Dorr for $10 says,
yeah,
if somebody wants to try to write a book, do you think the self-publishing path over the traditional getting an agent and try to get a big publisher to pick up is the best way?
The best way, I
way,
think, is the indie publishers. There's so many of them out there, and I've mentioned some on here: Atheon Books, Chris Kennedy, Defiance Press, who I write for, Wargate, who I write for. There are a ton of them out there, and they have a number of different imprints. Okay, so depending on what you write, they may be interested in it. They are the best path to go because they can help guide you as an author through this. If it's, hey, I want the book out there and I just want to be able to have complete control of every aspect of it, yeah, self-publishing route's great to go. I don't ever recommend anyone going through the traditional route. If you're successful as an indie publisher or as a self-published writer, sometimes the traditional route will reach out to you and go, look, you've been selling your books through an indie publisher. We want to buy your books, your line, and publish all books going forward.
And if possible, I'd just like to give a little encouragement on that front, which is one of my very favorite authors ever, Frank Herbert. Spent so many years trying to find a publisher and ended up finally doing, in his age, what I guess would have been the equivalent of self-publishing, which is a textbook / manual publisher approached him and said, hey, we've never published fiction before, but what do you think? Can we give it a shot?
Look at Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy was his first book was rejected. Hunt for Red October was rejected across the board. Dozens of publishers shot him down, etc. He went to Naval Institute Press, who only wrote historical naval books and materials and published Navy History magazine. And he convinced them to do this book on the Hunt for Red October. Then it got, once he was successful with them, it became picked up by a mainstream traditional publisher. So, yeah, I lean everybody away from the whole traditional publisher route because I will tell you, it is rough when your agent goes, I can sell this book, but you have to change the title. And you're like, God, I spent hours trying to come up with the right title for it. I don't
Yeah,
want
if it gets out there under your title and it's successful, then you're able to then kind of stand on the success of the first book.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's it exactly. I mean, it seems to me that of all, the commonality of all these stories that we've told is that publishers didn't even work many years prior for people who are proven to be excellent writers since then. The people who are foundational to the entire science fiction genre were not able to be picked up and be published.
Yeah.
If it didn't work for them, maybe you should learn from their mistakes. Anyhow.
Well, Razorfist is, he's gone out and done some crowdfunding. It's been absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
I think it was $300,000 for his graphic novel he's got coming out.
Yeah.
Guy's done a great job. And his 2 books were indie published, and I bought them, and I've read them. I've reviewed them.
I read one. I thought it was really good. I haven't read the second one, so
it's great stuff. It's all on how much control and how much time do you have and things along those lines that you're willing to commit to the process, because the self-publishing route is a lot with you. Oh yeah, well, Larry's a force all on us.
You know what, chat? Blaine, chat is asking us if we can get Razorfist on the show, and I was going to say, okay, challenge accepted. I've got more difficult guests before, but I just realized you have an in. Razorfist.
Oh yeah, I know
his show before.
I will happily try to engage with him on that. I believe he has a day job. That can always be a challenge, but we'll work out something. I want to have him on. I just got the first copy of Anvil Magazine, which is the new magazine of the Iron Age. I went through it, and they had 8 pages, I think, from his graphic novel in there, kind of as a sneak preview, and it was pretty cool.
That's excellent.
So, I mean, and we're going to get the publisher of Anvil to come on. I've talked to him already. He's going to come on the show. We've got some other authors coming up as well. We've got a full slate. It's just, we did the live meeting this week, and I had 2 or 3 people asking me about publishing books. And I'm like, God, if we have that, large of a percentage of a small group of people asking about this, there's probably a lot of people that have these same questions.
Well, that's it's interesting you should mention that. You Arctic Boy is in the chat. He's got a book, that's just about ready. There is a very creative kind of group of folks that has come to follow us. So it's I really am very happy with the community. It's kind of like what you were saying. Develop your community, develop your tribe, right? That was one of the messages that we talked about this weekend at the meetup, is that it's very important not to just kind of find people who will listen to you and buy your stuff, but, will be there as a resource for whatever, because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what you're going to need.
I didn't sell any books while I was there. I gave mine away. Part of this is making sure that you're feeding the people that support you down the road. And they'll post some nice comments, I'm sure, on Twitter and Facebook when they've done reading the book, but they got sneak preview books of the book before it's even out. And that was, my whole thing is, why not? I realize I probably have cost myself 3 or 4 sales there, but it doesn't matter in the greater scheme of things. I'm building my tribe, and I'm letting the fans know that I support them as much as they support me. And I'm trying to be as helpful as possible in that. And as a writer, that's what you have to do. It is a commitment to be a writer. It's not just writing the book. And as Sibley's learning this very well. It's like, I want to have an audio book. I want to have other forms of my book. I want to get the sequel out and stuff. And it requires additional help to get that done and do it well, unless you're doing it full time like I am, where I can dedicate the time and effort and energy to doing that. A lot of guys just don't have that because they're working full time. So, working with an indie publisher, and there's a lot of great ones out there now. It's a fantastic way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I've discovered that myself with my own writing, whether it's the secret project or whether it's other projects that I'm doing. That when I'm doing a YouTube channel and I'm doing, oh, by the way, I do have a full-time job that sometimes tells me I have to work when I don't want to work.
Yeah.
It can definitely be a challenge, but
No,
it's
no.
but it's a hurdle to overcome, and it makes it that much sweeter when you get that final product in your hands. So I
Now,
totally
Well,
agree with
Blaine,
that.
Blaine,
yeah.
I see that we're wrapping up, and
Okay.
chat has something that they want to address that I feel needs to be addressed.
All right.
Of all the authors that we have come on our show to promote their works, you maybe do the very worst job of doing so. You have a pre-order coming out literally today,
No, it comes out August 8th. August 8th.
August 8th. So next Tuesday, and you haven't said a word about it.
Yeah, because I'm not a whore. I always feel awkward when Scott does that. He goes, "Hey, Blaine, tell him about what your book is coming out," and I'm like, "Oh, I hate doing this." Because I don't want to look like I'm doing the show to shill my own stuff. Okay, I really don't. But
Well,
yeah,
how about I tell you this next time?
How about this?
Blaine, why
We'll
don't you
shill for
take a
you.
few minutes to build your tribe.
yeah. Well, okay. Let me just tell you, the next book of Blue Dawn releases August 8th. There's a very good chance that it'll release in paperback, digital, and audiobook. Because the audiobook's done. I listened to the last edits on the drive to Louisville that I had for it. So yeah, there's a real good chance we're going to get it in all formats right out the door. Defiance has been phenomenal. For the first time ever, I got my author copies like a month before the book came out. That's never happened in my life, which is why the folks in Louisville got, a handful of the fans out there got it. It's a great book, continues the Second American Civil War. We're going to reach a climax of some of that in the next.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of buildup in this. There's definitely some advancement of the story.
Yeah, well, I always introduce one or two new characters into this, and the new character, we have a hacker character who's just a lot of fun. So, Blue Dawn's a blast. If you're a believer that dark times are ahead of us, etc., this will give you a glimpse of what the dark times look like. Blue Dawn series goes there. Land and Sea. Hey, I just finished book 6. Brent, who's my business partner, who came up with the original idea for Land Sea, is reviewing it right now. Once I'm done with that, it goes to the editor, and then that will probably be out October, November, because right now I'm started working on the next trilogy for next year, which kind of launches season 2, and the first book in that series is Cyclones of Chaos.
And to give you a tiny, very, very brief review of that series, it's the rule of cool put into novel form. It's amazing. I love it so much.
I like the fact I made people cry in Land and Sea in book 3. At the end, there were people that were like, "You made me cry," or somebody said I didn't cry, but I got pollen in my eyes. Yeah, so it's fun. I don't shill enough, but I don't want people to think I'm doing this show so that I can pump my books out there. That's
I just want to highlight what Joshua Clark says right here.
Grift us. Okay, go buy my damn book. Don't waste money on the BattleTech books. They don't care about me, and they're late on their royalty payments again. So, it's an ongoing struggle over there, and they're having their little sissy attack, and that's all great. But you want to support me, buy my books. Otherwise, I'm still going to be doing the show anyway.
We do have a sale. Good job. You have your promotion of your own stuff has resulted in a sale.
All right. Well, good.
I'll give you one more. If you want to get into a mech series that's guaranteed to never have ridiculous, long-reaching, multi-decades-long copyright dispute over mech designs,
Yeah.
Hop on in, baby.
Land and Sea has been fun. I mean, what?
Speaking of mech, I was gonna say, speaking of mech designs, wait till after the show.
Oh,
Yeah, hey, I sent my comments yesterday.
I saw it. I saw it all this morning. So
all right, chat. Well, that's all I needed to say.
All right, folks. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays you're tuning in to the Council of Future Conflicts, especially Fridays, because I try to make Fridays. I missed the last couple, but these guys have gotten a lot of my time. All right. So anyway, tune in on the Council of Future Conflicts, because honestly, you're going to get news that you don't get anywhere else. And it's all about how the news impacts you. And that's crucial stuff. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.